There will be no notice, Mara said. The descent frequency will be embedded in tomorrow's rest cycle. Citizens will believe they are going to bed. And they'll never wake up. That is the plan. I backed away until I hit the wall. The city, my building, my neighbors, the man across from me who repaired shoes after shift for extra food credits, the woman on level 19 who sang softly in the laundry corridor. Millions of people who thought their worst fear was losing work. All of them scheduled for burial inside sleep. I shut my eyes. When I opened them, Mara was closer. "We can stop it," she said. I almost laughed again. With what? 4 people and a child? Nia is why we have a chance. The sleeping girl stirred under the blankets as if hearing her name in a dream. Mara lowered her voice. She was born resistant. She can enter the pillar harmonics consciously. She doesn't just hear the sleep field. She can alter it. We've tested on local grids only. Small pulses. Enough to hide messages. Create outages. Open blind corridors. I looked at the child. "You want to use her against the entire network?" "No," Mara said. "We want to use the truth." Thomas unfolded a paper map across the nearest table. At its center was Somnus Tower. "If we can get into the origin chamber beneath level 81, he said, Nia can inject a cascade through the pillar carriers. Not a kill signal, a wake signal. Soren added, "A dream signal." I stared at them. Mara's eyes held mine, steady as a blade. "We don't need to destroy the city tonight. We only need to interrupt synchronization long enough to break continuity protocol. If enough people dream at once, the mesh destabilizes. The irreversible descent fails. Halcyon loses control. And then people wake up in a city that can no longer lie to them." I looked again at the projection of the dome, at the hidden sky beyond it. Hope is a dangerous thing in a controlled society. Most people think fear is the stronger chain. It isn't. Fear makes you crouch. Hope makes you stand. And once you are standing, you notice the door. I said, yes. The plan was simple, in the way all impossible plans are simple. At change of shift the next evening, Tomas would trigger a coolant fault in the lower mechanical spine. Security would funnel toward infrastructure protection. Mara and I would enter Somnus Tower through waste processing, using my access memory of the maintenance routes. Soren would remain below with Nia and transmit from the relay chamber once we opened a physical bridge into the origin line. "What exactly is in the origin chamber?" I asked as we prepared. Mara answered while checking a coil of fiber cable. The first engine Halcyon built under the tower. Core sleep architecture. Suppression archives. Legacy memory banks. Memory banks. She hesitated. Another twist. "There's one thing I haven't told you," she said. I stared at her. "Now." "I needed you here first." I almost turned away then. I think she saw it. "My mother worked in Somnus," she said quickly. Before she disappeared, she left records, partial ones. In them, she referenced a group of children used in early synchronization trials. Children with high adaptive coherence. I already knew before she said the rest. You were one of them. The tunnel seemed to tilt. No. You were selected at 5. Voluntary parental contribution under emergency housing relief. I could not breathe. "My mother," She didn't abandon you, Mara said. She signed because Halcyon told her it would guarantee your safety. Then they altered memory across your household. Standard retention fracture. Faces go first. Something inside me, something old and carefully frozen, cracked open at last. I saw flashes then. Not full memories, but fragments loosened by the pressure. A warm hand. A woman kneeling to button my coat. White clinical lights. A man saying, "He's responsive. Increase phase tolerance." A lullaby stopping in the middle. They used your cohort to map how dreaming could be reduced without damaging labor function. Mara said softly. You rose because your conditioning was ideal. They built part of the system around minds like yours. I sat down before my legs gave way. In that moment, I understood Halcyon better than I ever had. Not just its cruelty, its style. It did not simply crush what threatened it. It turned lives into tools so completely that people thanked it for the purpose. When I looked up, Mara was waiting, not touching me, not pitying me. That helped. What happens if we fail? I asked. Then the city sleeps, she said. So we went. The following night, Somnus Tower glittered above the district like a needle made of frozen light. I had entered it thousands of times through polished lobbies and biometric arches. Entering through waste processing felt like crawling into the body of a dead god. The tunnels were wet with condensation. Fans throbbed overhead. We climbed past filtration ducts and maintenance rails, while alarms somewhere distant marked Thomas's fault as it bloomed across the lower grid. Mara moved like someone who had spent months learning the tower's blind angles. I moved like someone relearning his own skeleton. At level 78, we paused behind a service grill while 2 security officers passed. Still time to leave, she whispered. I surprised myself by smiling. No, I said, there isn't. By level 81, the building had begun to feel aware of us. Doors cycled unexpectedly. Hall lights shifted from white to amber. A soft voice on the internal system requested all unauthorized personnel return to assigned paths. It never named us, but the tone was almost intimate, like a parent calling children home. We crossed the operations deck, where I had spent 11 years watching people sleep. My own station glowed in the dark, active, waiting. On the center wall, the city pulse moved in serene blue waves. Millions of sleepers. Millions about to be lowered into permanent silence. Mara found the concealed panel behind the archive rack. I keyed it open, with fingers that remembered the sequence before my mind did. Beyond was a narrow lift with no visible controls, just an old biometric plate. I put my hand on it. For one terrible second, nothing happened. Then the lift opened. Your trial imprint, Mara said quietly, still in the bones of the system. We descended. The origin chamber was larger than I expected, and older than anything else I had ever seen inside the city. It felt less built than buried. Rings of obsolete machinery surrounded a central well of pale light. Thick cables, some wrapped in newer halcyon casings, and some left exposed, ran outward into the dark like roots. Along the far wall stood column after column of glass caskets, filled not with bodies, but with suspended hardware, neural lattice cores bathed in dim fluid. And above them, projected in thin gold script, Continuity Protocol. Ready. A voice spoke from the shadows. I wondered when someone would bring you back here. A man stepped into the light, wearing executive black. He was older, elegant, and utterly calm. I knew him at once from internal broadcasts. Director Cale Ormond, head of Civic Stability. The face that announced ration adjustments with paternal regret. The voice that thanked us for resilience. Mara raised the pulse cutter in her hand. Ormond did not react. "You really should not point unfinished weapons at finished decisions," he said. "You murdered 34 million people," Mara said. "Not yet," he replied. "And not murder. Preservation." I felt a hot surge of hatred so sharp it steadied me. "You declared a living citizen dead to lure me," I said to Mara. She looked at me sharply. "What?" Ormond smiled. "That was me," he said. "We were monitoring her breach attempts for months. Once she made contact with you, this became simpler." Mara's face changed, just for a second. A third twist. We had not broken into the trap. We were the trap. Ormond walked slowly between the old machines. "Mr. Vale," he said, "you have always performed beyond your category, even as a child. We had hoped you might rise into executive conditioning, but your empathy scores remained inconveniently high, so we placed you somewhere useful instead, near the center, watching the herd sleep." He spread a hand toward the chamber. "The city cannot survive full waking, not anymore. The outside is not dead, but it is unstable, sparse, and incapable of supporting our current population. Systems fail faster each year. Food synthesis is declining. Structural fatigue advances. We have one humane option: reduce the burden, preserve order, and carry humanity through contraction. By putting people into coffins they don't know they've entered," Mara said. "By preventing panic," Ormond corrected. "By making the choice civilization always lacked the courage to make." He looked at me. "You understand systems, Elias. Most men do not. Most men see only individual suffering in front of them. They do not see scale. They do not see arithmetic." He gestured to the columns. "The sleeping population becomes substrate, stable, useful, peaceful. The waking population maintains continuity until expansion is possible again." "And who decides who sleeps?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Competence, necessity, predictive social value. The usual tools." Mara stepped closer to the central well. "Open the bridge." "Oh," Ormond sighed. "Do you know why the company removed dreaming, Mara? It was not only control, it was contagion. Dreams spread longing. Longing spreads movement. Movement breaks systems. Every collapse in history begins with people imagining they deserve a different life." He turned to me once more. "But you already know that, don't you? That blank inside your memory. It was not damage, it was mercy. Your mother tried to remove you from trial after she realized what we were building. She attempted to sabotage a synchronization line. Many people died. We let you keep her voice. We took the rest. The world narrowed to a point. I saw white hallways. Red alarm light. A woman running. Someone shouting. The smell of burnt plastic. A child crying, maybe me. "You're lying," I said, though my voice had become distant to my own ears. "Am I?" Ormond asked. Mara's hand touched my wrist, brief and firm. "Elias," she said, "look at the console." On the central plinth, half hidden by status overlays, was a manual bridge port. Old, physical, real. We moved at once, Mara lunged for the plinth. I threw myself toward Ormond. He was older than me, but stronger than he looked, all efficient motion and practiced control. We hit the floor hard. Somewhere, metal rang out. He drove an elbow into my ribs and hissed, "You are mistaking sentiment for morality." I hit him back, not like a hero, not even like a brave man, just like someone who had finally found the face of a machine and wanted it to bruise. Behind us, Mara jammed the fiber coil into the bridge port. Alarms detonated across the chamber. Origin line breach. Unauthorized neural access. Continuity compromised. Ormond shoved me off and reached inside his coat. I saw the injector in his hand and knew at once it was a sleep spike. Instant descent. Permanent if dosed high. Before he could use it, the chamber lights went black. Then every screen flooded with one word. Dream. Nia had entered the network. The floor beneath us hummed like a living throat. The cables shivered. Across the chamber, the suspended cores flashed in rapid sequence, responding to a pattern they had not seen in decades. Ormond staggered, one hand to his temple. "No," he whispered. From the tower above came a sound I will remember until I die. Not screaming, awakening. Millions of minds slipping off a leash at once. Dreams poured through the pillar system like weather. Uncontrolled memory, image, desire, terror, beauty. The network had been designed to suppress variation, not survive a flood of it. Across the city, sleepers began to dream deeply for the first time in their lives. The chamber filled with projection spill. Not data. Fragments. A child running through actual rain. A woman holding sunflowers. A man opening a door in a wall and finding the ocean beyond it. Faces. Voices. Birds. So many birds. Ormond fell to one knee, clutching the injector so tightly his hand shook. "You don't know what you've done," he said. Mara stood at the plinth with tears on her face and laughed once, breathless. "Yes," she said. "I do." The old machines screamed. Somewhere high above us, glass shattered. I could have killed Ormond then. Perhaps another version of me would have. But the city was already breaking open. And I found, to my surprise, that I no longer wanted blood. I wanted witnesses. I wanted him awake inside the world he had tried to bury. So I took the injector from his hand and threw it into the well. On the nearest screen, a new cascade began. Archived files unlocking under wave disruption. Public channels opening. Executive records replicating themselves into citizen feeds. Dome schematics. Sleep protocols. Continuity rosters. Truth spreading faster than silence could catch it. Mara stared. Nia did that? I shook my head, though I was not entirely sure. "No," I said. "I think the system wanted out. We made it back to the upper levels through corridors full of disoriented workers and failed security locks. No one tried to stop us. Most stood frozen before walls and terminals, watching secrets spill into the city like floodwater. In the operations deck, my display wall had transformed. The serene blue sleep graphs were gone. In their place was chaos. Irregular waves, wake spikes, dream clusters, communication storms across every district. Alive. The city was alive. Outside the tower windows, something else was changing. The false sky was flickering. At first, I thought it was system damage. Then I realized the camouflage veil over the dome was failing. The polished gradient stuttered, split, and peeled back in vast translucent sheets. For the first time in my life, I saw the real night above the city. It was darker than I expected, and fuller. Stars. Not the decorative points used in upper-tier children's media, but cold, innumerable stars, spread across a depth so immense, it made the tower seem like a toy. All around me, people were stopping where they stood to look up. Some wept. Some laughed. Some simply held on to each other because their bodies no longer knew what to do inside a truth that large. Mara stood beside me at the glass. "That," she whispered, "is what they took." Far beyond the edge of the city, dawn was beginning. Not the programmed dawn of apartment screens, but a pale line lifting at the horizon, honest and slow. It touched the land beyond the dome wall, and I saw green there. Real green. Not enough to save us by itself. Not enough to promise ease, but enough to prove that history had not ended just because a corporation found profit in saying so. The hours after are harder to describe. Systems failed. Districts rioted. Security fractured. Some executives fled toward the upper transit rings and found the locks already open to everyone. Some tried to keep control and were drowned in the sheer force of a population newly able to imagine alternatives. We found Soren and Nia before noon in the relay chamber below the old tunnels. Nia was awake, exhausted, and smiling in the peculiar, distant way children sometimes do after surviving something adults can barely name. "What did you send?" I asked her. She shrugged under the blanket around her shoulders. "A door," she said. Soren checked the city feeds through a hand receiver. Continuity is dead. Half the tower staff are gone. External gates in sectors 2 and 6 are opening manually. There are crowds forming already. "Crowds to do what?" Thomas asked. Soren lowered the receiver. "To see if the lie ends where they were told it did." Later, much later, when the first emergency councils began and ordinary people started speaking in rooms where only executives once decided fate, someone asked me whether I regretted helping break the system before we had a better one ready. It was a fair question. Cities can die from truth as surely as from lies, if truth arrives all at once. But I remembered the sleep graphs, the calm blue obedience, the gentle machinery of living burial. And I remembered the first thing I saw when the false sky failed. Not panic, but wonder. So I answered honestly, no. Because a cage with soft lighting is still a cage. Because a peaceful lie is still a lie. Because no company should own the human night. In the weeks that followed, the city changed its sound. It was subtle at first, less synchronized, less smooth. Windows opened where they had once remained sealed. People stayed awake too late, speaking to neighbors whose names they had never learned. Children, once trained to report unauthorized imagination in school modules, began drawing strange, impossible things from their first unsuppressed dreams. Forests, oceans, birds, faces they somehow remembered without ever having seen. And every evening, more citizens climbed to rooftops, scaffolds, broken tower ledges, anywhere they could find a view, just to look upward until the stars came out. I went with them often. Some nights Mara stood beside me. We did not become lovers. That was never the shape of what existed between us. She was the person who opened the first locked door in my life. That kind of bond belongs to a category older than romance. Once, under the real sky, I told her I had begun to remember my mother's face. "Fully?" she asked. "Not fully," I said. "Enough." She nodded, as if enough was sacred. Maybe it was. Months later, when the first teams crossed beyond the opened sectors and returned with seeds, maps, and stories of habitable valleys beyond the eastern ridges, the city gathered in shared silence to hear them speak. Not the forced silence of submission, the living kind. The kind people choose when the next words matter.
We were fewer than we had been before the truth, but more human.
The dome still stood above us, cracked in places, glimmering in others. A relic, a wound, a shelter, and a warning all at once. We had not escaped hardship. Food was still rationed. Power still flickered. Old loyalists still plotted. The future remained uncertain in all the honest ways futures should. But every night now belonged to us. People slept when tired, stayed awake when frightened, dreamed without permits. And sometimes, in the deepest hours, when the city had gone quiet in its new imperfect way, I could hear music moving through the buildings from open windows and rooftop radios. Little human signals passing from one dark to another. Proof that no matter how carefully anyone tries to engineer obedience, something in us keeps reaching outward. Something unruly. Something bright. Something broken enough to let the truth through. If you are hearing my voice, then the signal traveled farther than they wanted. That means the night is still open. That means the dream survived. That means this is broken signal.